So this is now Q&A. I'm going to give myself the duty of the first question, and this is really to all of you, I suppose. We've talked about the origin of the campus, and I had actually heard that when the campus was first given to the university, that the then Chancellor or Vice Chancellor decided to put one building in each corner of the site so that nobody could take any of the site back again. And from that point of having sort of put a stake in the ground at each corner, then the university has developed, obviously, internally. But I'd like to hear your thoughts about what next, in the sense of what are the issues now that we've got a fantastic campus, and everyone I speak to talks about how significantly improved the campus is. What could improve it beyond where we are today?
I think the big thing with the modern campus now is permeability. So if you look at all the old campuses, Sydney Uni, etc., originally they were built with these very imposing palisade fences all the way around them, with beautiful iron gates to say, here's where you enter, and we can shut you out if we want to. It doesn't work like that anymore. Every campus right around the country is trying to invite people in, to demystify what goes on there, to break down the ideas that this is not some sort of elitist place. We're doing interesting stuff, worthwhile stuff, and we want you to know about it and share about it and maybe give us some money to help us do more of it. So the idea that you have, you make nice spaces that anyone can walk through. So the idea that if I live over there and I work over there, you're welcome to walk through the campus, enjoy the campus, and maybe you'll buy a coffee or something on your way at one of the shops within the campus. So it becomes it integrates with the city around it. So I can see in the future, especially now that there are more student residences on campus, there could be restaurants here where they're open at night, people from surrounding areas come in and eat at the campus, just like it's part of the city. And that the edges of the campus are no longer defined. They start to become a little bit frayed almost, and little tentacles that are reaching out into the surrounding areas, but the surrounding areas reach into them. We did a master plan for the Canberra Institute of Technology a number of years ago in Canberra, and we're talking about what sort of things could be sort of workshopping, what sort of things could be on a campus. And one of the teachers said, well, when I look at campuses, and I suppose she's specifically thinking of ANU, they're really beautiful places to be in. I'd like to live on one. Why can't you actually have apartments for just anyone in the middle of the campus? And we thought, that wasn't a great idea to do something like that. So it really does start to become integrated with the community. And I think that is a big part of the future.
Yes, I'd briefly comment that when this campus was first created, the university was a university of technology. It was the New South Wales University of Technology, later changed its name, and the Vice-Chancellor was a nuclear scientist who had very little interest in what Andrew's just been talking about. But there was one gleam in his eye, and that was to do with the old tote. And Baxter's interest in amateur theatre was going to drive him to make sure that the old tote survived at least for a couple of decades, and out of that came NIDA, and out of that came great things. So it was just a spark of cultural imagination in the mind of that nuclear scientist, which led to other things outside. But there's also the phenomenon today where campuses are taking downtown space and high-rise building, a high-rise campus, remote from the original grassroots or Greenfields campus. So I think, picking up from what Andrew's saying, the campus of the future might be a cluster of buildings scattered all over the city, with no territory which a professor will own. The territorial, the way a professor captures a particular building or a piece of space, that was the game when I was here, but no longer, thank goodness.
John.
Yeah, I think the main one is engaging people to live in the campus. So if you can get more students, the technology of computers, people learning online, you've got to keep them in the campus. So it's making the campus a place where people want to come to is the most important thing at the moment. We build lecture theatres, they don't work because you don't need the 500 people in that one room anymore. They can learn that online, they don't go. So you've got to create the spaces which engage with the people and make them want to be in that space. So more living on the campus is where I think we should be pushing to make them engage and stay on campus and be comfortable to come into these spaces and stay.
Just a quick word from the council's perspective. What we, I suppose, need to do is somehow interrelate the urban environment around the university. We've tackled it. I mentioned the light rail project. We put in a pre-feasibility study 2011, and the government took that and did build a public transport system. We are still trying to work on that. For example, we're pushing now to, we've got on public display the first extensive bit of separated bike path, which will start in South Coogee, go up Bunurong Road, go up along Sturt Street, get to where the old Kingsford roundabout is or was at Souths, where the most southward of the planned light rail stops will be. Then it will head through a bit of the neighbouring council area, go across Gardeners and go up Houston Road and cut across, I think, at the Doncaster intersection with Anzac Parade and try and provide a bicycle pathway that will come from Coogee, go up, interrelate with the light rail transport, and then service the university and then move on to connect up with Centennial Park by Doncaster and then hopefully meet up with what the City of Sydney is doing with separated bike paths. It's another one of those contentious projects that Randwick City Council tends to get into. We had a huge battle over the light rail and reconciling that, and we're going to have another one over, I think, the separated bike path. And the most difficult will be to persuade or convince residents along Doncaster Avenue that this is going to be good for them, it's going to be good for the students at the university, it's going to be good for people that want to live in the university and yet somehow still access the CBD. So it's exciting times for Randwick City Council.
It is indeed. Yeah, thank you. That is very exciting and really complements the university very, very effectively. I think one of the other issues that hasn't been mentioned is the idea of lifelong learning, that people want to continue to live near a university and benefit in a lifelong way from all the facilities and learning that happens in a university. So I think that's one of the other really positive things that are happening, and the universities have to adapt and actually put classes on that engage with the local community and engage them in lifelong learning. Now we have a roving mic, so if anybody would like to ask a question, it's now over to you. We have a question right down here. Put your hand up so that our roving mic can see you.
I'm interested in the cost of running something like this with the glass and the air conditioning, and the cleaning, just the logistics. Because I work in a building that was sealed against noise back in the 80s, and our particular building cost a fortune to run. So I'm just interested to hear that perspective.
I'll ask John to answer that, but we also have people from facilities here, and they may well also have a view about the cost of running some of these new buildings. John?
Yeah, it's complicated because of the existing buildings, for instance, are very poor passive buildings. They're very thin glass. They have, I don't know whether you remember the facade out there that was all mirrored, stuck on the back because it's too hot. What we've been looking at is using this space to protect this this building. The central space between the two buildings is conditioned by spill air, so it's similar to a shopping centre approach. So we're not actually conditioning that space specifically. We can ventilate that space by opening elements if we need to. We've got fans up on the roof that this works as a smoke spill as well, so we can ventilate this space if we need to. The 50% on the top is to reduce the heat load through the roof. The protection of this facade on this edge is provided by the space between. We double glaze, we use high performance glass, we use shading where appropriate, we thermally insulate. It was an interesting conversation on this building when you get into laboratory spaces on whether you're over-insulating a building, which is the first time I've ever heard an environmental person tell me that one. But basically because you're putting equipment that are running and producing heat in a space, if you collect all that heat and keep it, then you're going to need to cool that space. Their research facilities, they need the conditioned space, they need the non-natural ventilation, if you want, in those areas because of the way that the research takes place. We have to suck the air through the spaces, we have to maintain specific temperatures. So they are scientific buildings, they're not a open workplace, so there are controls that are around these buildings. We do what we can to make them as efficient as we possibly can through the facade. There's solar on the roof of both buildings. We have, I can't remember, Jeffrey, do you remember how much we've got up on the roof of here? We use bore water, we use the best technology we can for the conditioning spaces. We're using central energy rather than diversified plant, which gives you some benefits. We're readapting this building, which gives another benefit environmentally, that we're not ripping the concrete down and building a new concrete building. We're replacing the facades, but we're replacing them with more high performance facades. Yeah, I don't know whether that answers it, but we do think about it, we plan for it, and there are strict, the university is very involved in maintaining as low as possible.
I can probably add a little bit more to it. We have very sophisticated...
This is Jeffrey Leeson,
Yep.
who is the, I know you've got a new title, Jeffrey, Director of...
So I'm the Senior Manager of Deliveries, so I head up the construction team that are rolling out all of our projects on campus. We have very sophisticated building management systems, so air conditioning is turned off when people are not around. When there's low load chillers, when there's only a few people around, you don't have the entire building being air conditioned. Lights are on movement sensors, so they're only running when people are around. We're putting solar cells on roofs wherever we can. Probably more importantly though, we are going to be Australia's first carbon neutral university because of a joint venture we've entered into with an organisation that is building a solar farm out in Western New South Wales, and we'll be purchasing all of our energy from there. So that's quite an amazing achievement in the field of sustainability. But we do take sustainability very seriously. Well, up there is a track. Up there is a track.
2 tracks.
And very brave people who love abseiling climb over that handrail and they run along there and they
So was that a question about how you clean the windows?
Yeah.
Just for those of you at the back, the question was, how do you clean all these windows?
Yep, abseilers.
Yeah. So it's like the outside of a building, only it's on the inside of the building. So same.
And in fact, the outside of the building, where you've got the terracotta blades that John was describing, you wouldn't believe how many hours we spent doing mock-ups of how big is the squeegee mop for the cleaners. Can they get their hand in between those blades to actually clean those windows, because there's a gap between those blades and the glass. And there were many hours of doing prototypes of can we actually clean them. Yep, we took a squeegee to China.
That's a couple of really good questions. Thank you very much indeed. Any more questions? Come on, don't be shy. Yes.
Yeah, just to follow on from your earlier question about what's next. Obviously, you've built or almost finished quite a few beautiful buildings. What's the plan in terms of moving up towards the hospital with all the work that they're talking about doing now, and obviously merging both organisations? The integration you were talking about before can happen.
I might ask Nikki to talk about anything like that. I don't think the individual architects would know about what the plans are beyond the campus and their buildings. So, Nikki, would you be prepared just to say, are you thinking about heading towards the hospital? Or are you happy where you are in terms of the boundary of the university?
Well, I'm a very small representative of the university.
Yes,
as well.
that's fine. A little bit closer.
Sorry. So at the moment, I know that obviously there's some proposals that the government are putting forward with regards to a hospital there, and we're continuing to work with all levels of authority to engage with the hospital and others. One element that I think Andrew pointed out was permeability. It's just making sure that the university connects with its community. So we're looking to obviously have strong relationships with the hospital, with all our neighbours around us. So that's the extent of works that we're working towards. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And there's a question like that here.
It's actually more of a comment. I have some empathy for Murray. My grandfather was pushing for this university as a science university in the 40s. And I think it would be really beautiful to do a history of the main architecture of this university. Because I know in the library there are a lot of photos of the campus in the very beginning, and if it could be done in a architectural way, there would be so many alumni, so many people who would love to buy a book like that, I think. Or it could be done in a number of ways, but I just think it should be done because so much work has been put into it over the years, and especially nowadays. Have you got it? Yeah.
This one's probably this was done by Professor Desley Luscombe a number of years ago. It's probably due to be updated, I think. But I also know if you go to the University of New South Wales website, their archive department has a lot of stuff you can look at, which has a whole series of aerial photographs through the years and photographs of various buildings. And I agree, I think it's time to gather that together with the buildings and Jeffrey, you talk to the right people and have an exhibition and a book. I think it'd be a wonderful idea.
I just had one comment there. As far as the Faculty of Architecture was concerned, Eric Daniels, I think, wrote a history of that faculty, one of many, of course, and it was maybe 20 years ago. But I think you have to remember that coming back to the Baxter era, you had a nuclear scientist who didn't know one end of a good building to another. His brain was focused on atoms and such minute things. So for a long time there was nobody within the university administration who was strong enough to push for some quality buildings. The Roundhouse, I think, was one of the first. Andrew mentioned a couple of others. The Roundhouse came out of the Government Architect's Office. Joe van der Steen, I think, was the architect. But, you know, little by little, Cole might have had something to do with it, but I worked on some of the details for the Roundhouse with a bloke called Joe van der Steen. But I think the point I'm making is that the growth of a commitment to good design was slow initially because you were surrounded by these scientific boffins who all they wanted to do was look under a microscope.
Yes, yeah, and it was a sandhill. I mean, I think it's hard to imagine that now, but that's what it was like. Yes, we've got a question at the back there.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, hold it close so that everyone can...
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the bike track. One correction, I think you meant Bundock Street. Oh. You said Bunnerong Road, and I thought...
I did, didn't I? No, it does run along Bunnerong, comes to the intersection. I think it's Sturt.
Bundock. And then
Bundock comes to...
How are you going to get across Bundock Street and Sturt? It's a terrible intersection there.
It will get across because it will involve putting in lights and then moving the... that's right. But if you know where the Sturt Street intersection is, and people will cross on the southern side via the lights,
right,
go across to the western side of the military-owned land, and then just go a short distance up and turn right into Bundock. We haven't decided on the final design for the Bundock Street section. We don't know whether we will run it along the northern boundary of the military site, or whether we will put it in the middle of Bundock Street as a separated bike path. That we will finalise that. But I think the most exciting thing will be that it will be a safer way for students to be and staff to be able to access the university rather than just simply depend on the car. I'd noticed with interest during one of the talks there was a big emphasis in the 60s to get the cars out of the university. Now council's trying to get the cars away from the access points and control that and just make it a bit... We're really proud of what we are trying to achieve along this section of Anzac Parade from Kensington to Kingsford. Oh, look, I'll start talking about bikes all night.
Well,
my friend Larry over there, if you come up to him and have a chat to him, he'll tell you...
I haven't finished yet, but there was another part that was very important, and especially to the university, a bike path, and it was an existing one that goes from High Street here, down Wannsee Road, down Allison Road. Now, it's a dedicated off-road bike path, 100%, and it's disappeared with the light rail. And I noticed down, and unfortunately they've even caged it off now for years, and you have to go along this potholey, dangerous part in all the traffic. So we've been putting up with that for years now, but I noticed there's a path there along Allison Road now, where the bike path was, but it looks really narrow, and they've landscaped it. I mean, it looks lovely, but totally unfunctional, because if a bike gets on the edge of that, you'll go right over. It's dangerous, right? And if people are walking and it's shared, and I'm really concerned, and it's a beautiful path. I mean, when you look at the bike paths in Sydney, at the map, we are one of the only areas that has these off-road bike paths, and we have mostly flat sort of areas around Maroubra. It's just a bike haven around here, and it's so important for people who need to reduce their high glucose, you know, with this obese society we have. So we need, I have noticed, I ride my bike as much as I can into the city, and I have noticed over the past 30 years, since I've been riding from Maroubra into the city, that there's such a huge increase in people using it.
Thank you so much for your comments. We are going to, you might want to talk to Murray offline, because, you know, you've obviously got a detailed knowledge about the bike paths in the areas. Yeah. Well, talk to Murray about it offline. Now, we need to wrap up in a few minutes. I've got a couple of questions. We've got one here, but we've also got one over here.
Yeah, just got a
very quick
question. You mentioned about student accommodation on campus. Does that mean you're intending to expand more teaching spaces, or are you just encouraging more people to live on campus compared to living outside of the campus?
Do any of you want to comment about student accommodation?
So I think it was a comment that, again, Andrew brought up, or no, it was John, trying to bring the diversification of uses. So increasing and improving and encouraging more student housing is something that the university is looking to do, definitely. Yes.
It's always a competition for space, isn't it? Between student accommodation and teaching and research and all the rest of it. Okay.
Sorry, I know that we're like short on time, but I was just, maybe I can just stay and get the answer to the question. I was just curious, when everyone talks about permeability and the concept of like reaching out and reaching in, what efforts have been done to kind of facilitate that community engagement and student participation, and like what kind of input is happening around that whole concept of getting everybody involved in relationship building and all that?
So my very brief. We are at the very early stages of looking at how we move the university into the next phase, and we're doing some internal work, and we will be working with various groups of people, such as students and the general community, to start to engage. Again, I think it was Andrew who mentioned it's about time we update our master plan framework, and we're at the early stages of doing that.
So with the light rail that comes up High Street, and there's going to be a major new stop in High Street, kind of near Lowy, or Gate 9 basically, and we know that area quite well because it's another project that we won in a competition, is actually looking at that whole space, and that is going to, so in front of Clancy Auditorium out to where the Gate 9 is and where the stop is, it's going to be a much more open, inviting space where it will become a real front door to the upper campus, which I think it's always lacked. You know, you've got the mall, which is a very clear, here we are, this is the way into the university, but the upper campus has always had a whole series of sort of little entries. And I think the new Gate 9 is going to be a very inviting, symbolic entry for the upper campus. And if you remember Clancy, that's where a lot of the graduations happen. And they're a wonderful little piece of theatre, because everyone's there looking very happy. They've got their proud parents there. They've got big bouquets of flowers. Everyone's taking photographs. They've got their gowns on, and all that'll be part of the theatre that's sort of on display to High Street and to the surroundings. And I think that's part of that permeability and engagement. It's also about breaking down what actually happens in this place, and it's not that mysterious, and it's wonderful, and all those sorts of things.
There's also the light rail stop at Anzac Parade. So the two new light rail stops will actually be a new focus for the university interface, I think, with the local community, the local area. It'll be a major address, I think, for the university at both Anzac Parade and High Street. And obviously, where new public domain works there will actually transform those two stop areas.
Thanks, David. We do have to bring tonight's discussion to a close at this point. I'd like to ask Councillor Matson to say thank you to you all for coming.